Welcome back to Overwatch Reddit Questions, another week, another episode. This is Overwatch Support with KarQ. Here we go. Most upvoted question of the past week was, what is with the recent mentality that shot calling is useless below extremely high ranks? I've always seen shot calling as one of the most important skills to have in this game. As a main support player, the amount of games I played that have been saved simply because me and someone else decided to start making callouts and voice chat are more than I can count. Yet, I've seen an influx of people recently saying that shot calling is pointless, and a couple of content creators I've watched have mentioned it as well. I'm not one of those, I've never said that. Where did this idea come from, and why is it suddenly so common? Okay, first of all, this isn't actually a recent mentality. It's kind of been going on ever since Overwatch 2 has been out. It's been over a year now, and a lot of it has to do, in my opinion, with three factors. Number one, the ping system has alleviated a lot of issues with shot calling. You can relay a lot of information with this new system in Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch 1, so a lot of people bypass it. Number two, just to pertain to the actual shot calling is useless mentality, a lot of shot calling in the lower ranks is not necessarily correct. A lot of times it can lead to bad plays, like for example, you go like, oh, focus, Roadhog, but Roadhog has, his take a breather, full juice, he's getting double pocketed, and he has all his cooldowns available. That's not necessarily good info to go off of. There's a lot of trust that can be misplaced for a lot of people, which is why a lot of people say the shot calling is useless. I do want to make the distinction that there's two different types of callouts though. Shot calling is one thing where you kind of have like a macro game plan, right? And that is a little hard to do, especially in a solo queue ranked environment. So that part may be, I wouldn't say useless, but not very helpful in a lot of cases. However, I do want to encourage, if you're comfortable with voice chat, to make just not shot calling, but just callouts, cooldown callouts, and ultimate economy callouts. That is information that is open for interpretation. So it's not necessarily shot calling a plan to focus this person or that person. It's more of like, Ana use nade, Ana no nade, Ana no sleep, Kiri no Suzu. Like if I'm a Junker Queen, but like I'm not voice calling, but someone else called it for me, oh, their Kiriko use Suzu. It's like, oh, perfect. I can use my Junker Queen ult now without worrying about, the entire ultimate getting cleansed, right? That is useful information for my interpretation, but it's not necessarily them like calling the game for me, if that makes any sense. So a TLDR is shot calling is not necessarily useless, but it's not very helpful in a lot of cases because the actual decision, the game plan decision is not always correct. Definitely focus more on callouts. And then one last thing is that it can feel more rewarding when everyone is in comms, which is why people do love voice comms and everything. The reward factor and having like this whole synergy where everyone's on the same page can feel fantastic. So you have to ride the highs with the lows. Okay, next question is, how do you play Winston? I've finally been getting into the tank role and have had little success trying the monkey, but getting picks seems absurdly hard with this low damage and that every support but Zen and Lucio can heal through. Should I be consistently getting kills while I dive him, or just being in the backline with my fat bubble to reduce support efficiency enough? How can I get more picks? How do you play Winston? Well, you gave a couple of questions on how you're supposed to do it. Are you supposed to get picks, or is disruption enough? And the answer is support disruption or reducing the enemy support efficiency is more than enough in most cases. And your last question of how can you get more picks? Picks only happen by a solo Winston if you have Primal Rage or they have a severely isolated solo target with no other sustain and they made a positional error. That's it. The majority of Winston in the high ranks is way less about getting picks on your own and more about disruption, jumping in at a good time when you know all 5 of them can't collapse on you, where you know your team can follow up and give you resources. That's number one. A lot of Winstons make the mistake of jumping too far in, going like, oh, I have no heals, or oh, I'm making so much space, but realistically, you kind of just went all in to dive their backline. You just tunnel, you just dive one target because that's how you think you're supposed to play Winston, and then you just die because all 5 of them look at you. That's not how you do it. Winston is kind of broken up into 2 phases. What's the first phase? You kind of have like to assess. So you kind of just do it's better to just give an example. Let's say Numbani first point, Winston. Generally, you want to dive the high ground, but a lot of Winstons will make the mistake of diving really deep into that super corner high ground on Numbani because they know an Ana is there. But especially if you do it by yourself, you're not going to get the pick because A, the Ana has both cooldowns, probably sleep and nade, and B, the teammates are also on the high ground, can turn around and also collapse, pressure the bubble, and then you'll end up dying before you can disengage. So what you're supposed to do on Winston is sort of like a two-parter, like a soft dive, where you kind of not jump really deep, but you can jump up to the high ground ledge, kind of jiggle peek, make an assessment on whether anybody is, number one, in an incorrect misposition and isolated, and number two, just tickle them enough. try to hit like zap a big group, because Winston's solo DPS is not great, but when you can hit a grouped up clump of enemies, your DPS gets multiplied because you hit all of them, right? So you do that and try to farm your Primal Rage. If you're really looking for solo picks, Primal Rage is your best bet to juggle and remove them from the game. That's pretty much the only way you can do it by yourself. So that's why Winston is generally not a very good hero in the low ranks. I'm not saying you can't play him, but the win rate has shown that he doesn't perform very well at low ranks, but is extremely popular at the high ranks for dive, because once you play Winston correctly with a coordinated tracer or somebody else to help follow up, or you understand that you're supposed to just poke for Primal Rage, just zap, poke with your sniper monkey, only jump in when you know you can fully disrupt them with the bubble, or you know you won't die and you will be able to get out. That's how you play him effectively. There's a couple of resources I made back then where I think is a video called How to Primal Rage. I did it with a Korean pro player that was on Toronto Defiant when I used to be on the team. It's called How to Primal Rage with Yak Pung. This was 4 years ago I made on my main channel. That's a good resource because we break down how to like Primal Rage in a bunch of different jumps, how to juggle correctly, how to like weave left and right. I highly encourage this. I'll link it in the comments. That's the only way to truly get picks on your own. But other than that, focus more on the two phases: the soft dive to assess, and then hard commit or hard dive once you're decisive. You make a decision with another person on your team, or you have your Primal Rage to surely ensure your life and survivability. Next, I feel like the response to Tank and DPS getting watered down support passive is massively overblown. I would like to preface this by saying that I would have preferred them to nerf the support passive or take it away entirely than to give a version in it for all roles, but here we are. Okay, now I will actually cut this and also give more context and interrupt. For those who have not been keeping up with Overwatch news, there is a director's take, or a director's blog from the game director Aaron Keller, giving a sneak peek of what's happening to Season 9 in Overwatch in around February, where they're giving down a mini support passive for all the heroes in the game, Tank and DPS, so they're all going to be able to have a little bit of self-healing. There were no like finer details in it. All he said was that there's a watered down version of it for all heroes, and the community is going off on the rails saying this is a terrible direction, blah 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 blah. Many different takes. My take is that I'll have a full video on my opinion of this later on, but you never really know until you try it out. There's just a lot of knee-jerk reactions, and I've been around in gaming long enough, in the Overwatch space especially long enough, that like every time they make an announcement and something comes out, it's usually not as bad as it's perceived to be. Sometimes they do miss. Game development and game balance is hard, but like I'm not a knee-jerk reaction guy where it's like this is instantly terrible. I truly don't know until I try it. It could be okay, but we don't even have any numbers. Aaron gave no numbers. What if the passive doesn't activate until after 5 seconds after not taking any damage? That's a long time. That's basically post-fight. What if it's only like 2 HP per second? Something less significant than like payload healing. People don't even realize the payload heals you 10 HP per second. That's on offense when it's moving, or not moving, as long as it's like an attacking phase. Like people don't even realize that. They may not even feel this, but we don't know until we try. Let me finish reading the thing with the overreaction. Support passive is 2 seconds of not taking damage and prompts 15 HP per second. Assuming the DPS or tank version of this would be somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 seconds, I'll start. And it seems to me that would almost always be quicker and more efficient to go to a health pack anyways, or get line of sight of the supports, than to hide for what could have been 12 to 15 seconds of a passive heal for a DPS. Would take a couple of games for Ball to get to full health at 15 HPS. Even in the most extreme scenario, Tracer gets down to 30 health and runs away. At 15 HPS, that's 10 seconds for her to be at full health after disengaging from damage. In almost every scenario, it would almost be quicker to get a health pack or your supports. I'm not arguing that it isn't a meaningful buff, but it isn't as nearly as game breaking as people trying to make it out to be. Am I wrong? Am I missing some latent benefit, or is everyone being dramatic? Okay, so now I will also add more to that. I do think people are being a little dramatic, but it is definitely pretty significant for some of the roster, more so than others. Right? Right now, as it stands, the current DPS passive is what? A quicker reload, and that's pointless on some heroes like Hanzo. But a mini like out of combat self regeneration could be pretty significant for just a select number of heroes. People are arguing Hanzo as a useless DPS buff, while some will benefit more than others. Like heroes on DPS, it would actually be meaningless for a lot, other than maybe some flyers like Echo and Pharah. They can hide behind a roof, get a little bit of self-heal. You don't have to go back to full health, but it does help like with some small engagements. Heroes like Sombra, Tracer, Genji, who can like blink, recall, or like hold deflect for a few seconds, that may be considered out of combat because you're not taking any damage, and it depends how long it takes for it to activate, but getting a little bit of extra HP in each duel could be pretty significant. So right now when they say watered down, if it's like 5 seconds for you to start regenerating, that could be fine. Most people wouldn't feel it, like for 90% of the roster, but if it's like 1.5 or 2 seconds before it activates, that could matter for those heroes I listed, like Tracer, Genji, and whatnot. But still, we don't know. And the reaction, a lot of the content creator stuff is the reaction for content. It's not wrong to have like, you know, any sort of opinion on this, right? Like people will have like their opinions, and they farm some outrage as needed. That's totally fine. Just my personal take is that we won't know till we have the full numbers, and I'll have a more, you know, eloquent response, and I'll be able to articulate my feeling on it once I actually try it out. But I'm a wait and see kind of guy. Next, how do you get enemies off of high ground as a support in low ranks? You're a gold or gold/platinum level player, BAP and a Kiriko player. I've been struggling with enemies on high ground, especially on bad maps where you kind of have to take high ground like Dorado, Numbani, Pariso before doing anything else. Unfortunately, a lot of players in low ranks don't know that, and they just want to push main right into the line of fire, which means I'll have to contest high ground myself. If there's only one person on high ground, it's not a problem to at least contest them. However, that's rarely the case, or the enemy supports come over and help them, which forces me to back off or fight a 1v2. What can I do in such a situation, assuming my team isn't going high ground? Is distracting 2 enemies worth it? I feel like I can't rely on my team to win a 4v3 on the ground either, especially when my other support is an off healer or my team relies on my healing. Is trying to force cart even an option, considering you'll get shot from above the entire time? The last part is trying to force cart, assuming you'll get shot the entire time. No, not with that many people. One person can slowly force cart, but the rest of you guys should flush them out of high ground. I think a lot of players have this mindset that to contest high ground, you have to kill them, but realistically, you just have to get them off high ground and put them in a different position. So you have one person, like a Tracer on, like, you know, underneath Dorado, just try to force the cart, or maybe Tracer's not the best example because she should be taking a stronger angle, but somebody to at least push the cart a little bit. That'll inevitably force at least one person on the defending team on Dorado to actually go stop the cart. And when one person goes, that usually does mean a lot of people will follow suit. I would say it's actually worth it. You're BAP and you're Kiri. You are mostly Kiri. You're able to kind of poke them from a distance on the long sight line and just try to like get some chip damage on them. And sometimes that's enough to make them like back off from high ground just for a second to maybe get some regeneration. That's more than enough. At the end of the day, this is a shot call you're going to have to make. If you understand that but your team doesn't, and you know that's your win con, and you feel like that would help your team, especially if you can't go anywhere, you have to literally make that call. You just have to type it to them, talk to them in voice chat. If you're not in voice, type it to them or ping and be like, hey, instead of being like, we need to get them off high ground, a lot of people won't listen to that. Just be like, you, Winston, or you, if they're not playing anybody like that's diveable, be like, Ryan, let's like you point to them and make them like go up the stairs on Dorado and actually flush them off high ground first. Okay, where does Ramattra stand in the current meta? I took a break from Overwatch during Mauga's reign because I hated the character and got tired of playing against one every match. Now I'm back and I decided to join the ranks of Tank. Haven't put a ton of time into Tank and Overwatch 2, and I really like Ramattra's kit. How does Ramattra fit into the game? Underpowered, overpowered, too situational. I want to know if I can essentially one-trick him to get better at the tank position. I'm a gold 4 tank right now. I say this all the time. You're able to one-trick any hero in this game and make it to the highest ranks, believe it or not. As much as people want to say you can't one-trick this hero is impossible to play, you can do it. Even heroes that are perceived as bad by a lot of high-ranked players, like, oh, Ryan is terrible right now, but like there's definitely Ryan one-tricks who are able to hit high ranks because they understand where to get value as needed. So Ramattra, definitely not underpowered right now. He was actually buffed beginning of Season 8. He was pretty good. They made his Omnic form a little better, and I think it's like 1 second less on his, they gave him more armor as well, so he's more durable. He's the better brawl tank than Reinhardt, I would say. Ram is pretty solid at the current time, although Orisa just got buffed in the mid-season patch, and Orisa plays pretty well into Ramattra comp, so it doesn't mean it's unplayable. Definitely can force him in a lot of cases. He's got single target chase because he can run into Nemesis, doesn't necessarily rely on Lucio. A little bit better with Lucio, but can totally get away with not playing that. You can stay in Omnic to poke as needed. He's a very versatile brawl hero because he can switch forms, right? And do what's needed. He can poke when needed, but when it's time to go brawl and engage, he can do that. But yeah, he kind of fits in on brawly maps, I would say. So a lot of control or flashpoint or even like payload maps where there's like a single square area that you have to contest, because your ultimate is a literally like get the fuck away from me ultimate. You pop that ultimate, annihilation, and everyone just runs away, right? It's so strong. But really, really open maps, that one will be a little tougher, where they don't have to, you know, necessarily, if they have many, many angles to shoot you from and there's all into the open, that's when you'll struggle. That's how Brawl normally struggles, where it's just like you get poked out before you can get close to them. But on any close range maps, Ram is fantastic, and he's very good right now. Is it just me, or does Overwatch 2 seem to be roll or get rolled nowadays? Recently, before the hacked weekend, I've been constantly in games where it's roll or get rolled. Either we're pushing the enemy so far back in spawn they can't push, or we are constantly dying. Now, most of it could be on poor positioning, but even if everyone's playing together in a game where we get rolled, it still happens. Most of the games where we roll people is when I'm on tank and have the opportunity to play Orisa, but then I have no supports that heal my teammates, so it's up to me and try to work on my kit while not dying while I have my soldier, blah, 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 blah. Yesterday, blah, 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 blah. Okay, TLDR, I'm tired of my games either get rolled or rolled. I want to enjoy the game and improve. The getting steamrolled in quick play is always going to be like a mixed bag, because quick play has a variance of ranks. So like you could be playing a 5-stack full of like a bunch of noobs and like one friend who's like playing with their friends who's good at the game and bringing up the quick play MMR while playing with 4. Not so great, but they're trying to have a good time. So like quick play is going to inevitably have more of that steamroll, and it seems like you're playing quick play. For ranked, I would say it's less common. So I don't know about the whole seem to get roll or get rolled. Like compared to Overwatch 1 when you had 6 players, it's a lot harder to steamroll because one person can't like kill all 6. It's easier to do it with like, you know, one less player on each team to completely dominate, right? So that's just a natural byproduct of reducing the amount of players. Like if you go to the extremes of like 100 versus 100, if like 5 people are really bad, 95 versus 100, it's pretty hard to have a complete steamroll. But in like a 1v1, one person can be really good and they're dominant. So the less players you have, when you go to the extreme of 100 to 1, you'll just know the less people there are fighting each other, the more easier it is to have very extremes, right, of roll or get rolled. So that's the Overwatch 1 versus Overwatch 2 argument. Now, Blizzard is aware of this, and they've already implemented the group respawn thing that's been happening for the past month. People haven't really realized, or maybe they have, but if you follow all this content here on this channel or other channels, but Overwatch has the group respawn mechanic where if you die within a certain time with teammates in quick play, you guys get an average spawn rate and you guys all come alive together. For example, if someone has a 10-second respawn, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and at 6 seconds another teammate dies, your respawn times get averaged out. So the 6-second guy turns into an 8-second spawn, and the 10-second guy turns into an 8-second spawn. So the guy who died first does have to die longer because he waits longer, but then the guy who dies last has a shorter respawn because it all gets averaged out as long as it's above a 5-second spawn still. And then you all come back together so you can regroup and push. That was one thing they implemented to help alleviate some of this steamrolling that's been happening. So for me, it definitely feels like it's just you to get roll or get rolled, but like again, I don't play as much quick play as the average player. I mostly play ranked, so maybe my perception of this is kind of off. Blizzard has acknowledged it, like I said, with that system, and they implemented that system, so it is probably more common than I see it personally. People will always be saying things are steamrolling. You tend to also only remember the really bad games where that happens, but all the in-between games where there was less one-sided rolls, you forget those. You only remember the negative things, getting rolled or steamrolled. So that's the negative bias or whatever. How do you deal with flankers as Ana? I'm a Silver 2 Ana player. I feel like I get out of Silver if I could learn how to duel flanking DPS like a Tracer, Sombra, Genji. I don't really struggle with Genji. It's really the Tracer and Sombras I struggle with, since they can delete half your HP before you nade yourself. I feel like I can never hit them with quick scoping. How should I deal with them, since I want to climb and my inability to duel flankers is one of my major flaws, preventing me from climbing on top of poor nade timing and positioning. So number 1 is your own movement. These flankers are trying to capitalize by catching you off guard. So if a Sombra is unstealthing and you know there's a Sombra in the game, you cannot be walking in a straight line too long, because the Sombra gets that what's it called, that virus on you and starts shooting you, and you're not moving in a, you know, already starting to strafe, then you will die very quickly. So number 1, your base movement should be a bit more mixed to kind of create some variance in your movement to force Sombras and Tracers to miss some of their bullets. That will inevitably keep you alive for a little bit longer, and especially against Sombra where you have to buy time for the hack to wear off so that you can nade yourself in time. That's number 1. Your own movement. Number 2, anticipation. If you know they have a flanker, you have to be privy to it and be prepared. Anticipation is one of the easiest ways to get better with dealing with flankers. It's whenever I see, like, you know, back in Overwatch League when like a Zenyatta would pop the Transcendence before the Sombra EMP, people would go crazy. But like, I've been playing this game a long time. It's not that hard to, like, if you know there's a Sombra and you hear an unstealth, just press the thing. You have like a 500 millisecond reaction time. Most people's reaction time is like under 200 milliseconds if you do like a reaction test. There's definitely a lot of time to do that. So anticipation is the easiest way to prime your neurons to, or it was some, I studied this like in brain neuroscience back in second year university. I do remember it changes your reaction time significantly. So anticipation, your own movement, and number 3 is obviously like your ability to duel with them as well. Like if you can't land the quick scope, that's a little bit of the aim skill issue that you're gonna just have to work on, right? And number 4, I guess, is your cooldown usage. Also, part of the anticipation package is if you know they have a flanker, you have your movement, you buy time, and then you can't blow all your cooldowns, especially on Ana. Like you said, you're the silver Ana player. Especially on Ana, right? Your nade and your sleep are one of your best ways to fight off flankers and force them away. You can't just burn them randomly because like your mindset is like, oh, I need to help my team by sleeping and nading them. But how can you help the team if you're dead? So instead of helping them, you have to help yourself. If you have to use them to save yourself because nobody else is peeling for you, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. If you're able to force their Sombra to, like, you know, they can't confirm the kill on you, like you nade yourself, you're able to chuck a sleep and make her TP out, that's fine because you're removing a 1-for-1 versus you helping your tank or DPS kill another person there. You're just helping yourself help them. Like if you're always dying, you're already gone and useless, and the Sombra stays alive and then kills your backline or your tank anyways. But if you save yourself, force them away, then you're still able, like even though they don't get any heals for that moment, at least you're alive, and then you can help them like 3-4 seconds later after fighting them off versus being dead and being gone for 10 seconds and plus the walk back. So either be gone for 5 seconds by fighting your duel, or be gone for like 20 seconds, 10 seconds to spawn and 10 seconds to get back. You know, pick one. And the one is, you know which one to pick. What do you do as a support when your team is allergic to shooting the Mercy? Also kind of applies to Lifeweaver, who also depends more on his team being good to win. Do I have to learn Ana for the anti? Bracket, I'm a terrible Ana. A backline Moira, flank with my Kiri, my aim isn't good enough to kill them. I'm basically sacrificing my tank for an unsuccessful dive or something else. It's positively insane how many people ignore her and how much free value Mercy gets by just holding down 2 buttons and occasionally rezzing an entire full HP tank when no one shoots her, but me. What do you do if your team is allergic? Unfortunately, not much other than calling out like, hey, if the Mercy flies in, like, shoot her. Like, it's very hard to teach 4 random teammates in a rank game to have different target prioritization. That's just the product of the rank you're playing in. A lot of times you have to do it yourself. The thing is, you don't necessarily have to kill her. Just pressure her enough to either stop her self-regen passive plus her support passive, and like shooting her just a little bit will force her to make incorrect Guardian Angel flights. Right? So imagine you're a Mercy player and you get shot a little bit. You're like, uh-oh, I'm getting shot, which means I'm in a sight line. Then you just start flying to somebody because you have tried to reposition. That is more often enough to force mistakes. Maybe she does fly into a better position, but more often than not, you force errors on her part. So you, if you can't really hit Ana, you're kind of playing, what, Lifeweaver in this one? Ana's a bit harder, but heroes like Baptiste, where you can just pepper her a little bit, where it's a bit more forgiving to shoot a couple of 3-round bursts. If you can just tag her a little bit, force her to make errors, and that should be more than enough to make her fly maybe accidentally into your team, then hopefully your team has no choice but to shoot her because she's like in front of them. You know what I mean? That is all you can really do. Yeah, on Lifeweaver, it's not really your job to do that, unfortunately. You mentioned Lifeweaver in that, so not really a Lifeweaver job, but as Bap, yes. As Kiri, sometimes, and as Ana, sometimes, if the angle permits. How bad is cheating in ranked? I've been playing this game on and off for a few years, like 2017, but it was always on console, and I was thinking of switching to PC because it seems more enjoyable with easier aiming, in my opinion. I've been playing PC for the past 2 days, and I was thinking about starting to play ranked, but I was wondering, is it even worth it? I always see people complain about cheating, but is it really that big of a problem? I wouldn't say it's like a massive problem, but cheating is inevitable in a lot of competitive multiplayer games, especially a free-to-play one. It's very obvious when you get really hard aimbot locking ones. So that's pretty bad, but those are very like blatant. The soft locking ones are a lot more subtle and harder to detect, and if people are soft locking where it's like really subtle, they're probably going to bypass the rank you're playing in and slowly, quietly make their way up to GM very quickly. But I actually think the perception of cheating is actually a lot more smurfing, because the game is free to play, there's a lot of alternate accounts, and people perceive any sort of half-decent Widow as an aimbot or a cheater, when realistically, they may be like a high Masters player smurfing in silver. That's probably the bigger culprit than anything. At the end of the day, focus on the only thing you can control, which is your own gameplay. The cheating in your matches will suck, but it's probably not as apparent as you think it is. It's mostly smurfs. But of course, if you run into like a blatant cheater, report them. If anybody's kind of like a 50-50, you just have to focus on you. You know what I mean? You can only focus on the variables that you can control. I would say it's still worth it because it's going to improve you as a player, right? Your rank is temporary, but your skill is eternal. Don't forget that. And if you want to play like a match where people are hopefully of the same caliber as you, minus the smurfs and cheaters, then you will improve a lot quicker. Final question of this week's episode. High level Tracer Genji mains, how do you deal with this matchup? I'm a diamond tank and DPS player with multiple mains. I'm recently trying to improve my Tracer and I'm having a steep learning curve trying to figure out the Genji duel. Normally, I'm willing to accept this duel with my other mains, even though the others are usually considered advantageous for Genji, but I can't figure out if the Tracer duel is a straight skill issue or just a bad idea for Tracer. Most of the duels start with Genji dashing, soon forcing recall, then having a face-off, blah, blah, blah. So my question is, Tracer supposed to poke, hard commit, or just retreat? I would say it's kind of, they're both very mobile DPS, and it's generally, like, you can mark them, right? You're trying to improve your Tracer versus Genji. You can annoy the Genji. At the end of the day, both of them will inevitably end up with somebody leaving. Either you get your recall forced out and you're gonna have to dip, or the Genji gets his deflect baited out. So Tracer and Genji is a battle of who blows their defensive cooldown first. Are you gonna blow recall first, or are you gonna blow deflect first? The only time you jump Genji is if he's in a pretty bad spot where you're in the effective range of your pulse pistols, not having gazillion spread. If you can force the deflect and make him leave, that's good enough. You don't have to giga chase him unless, you know, he dashed in a really bad spot. Like if he's on King's Row and you're blasting him a little bit, he forced deflect and he dashes up to the high ground, and you waste your time trying to go up the high ground and chase them. Like, what are you doing? So that duel is just poke him. I would not hard commit, and you only retreat if you get your cooldowns forced out earlier. That's basically how the duel goes. Your better strategy is to focus anybody who has no cooldowns available. That's Tracer's job, being disruptive on a bunch of different angles and picking out the person that has nothing to deal with you. The person who's not looking at you, like an Ana scoped in, boom, go for it. Zenyatta not paying attention, boom, go for him. If the Genji's not paying attention, you have the angle on him, you know, pressure him until he blows his cooldowns and he leaves. And if he doesn't leave, then great, you got the kill. Then if not, pick someone else. That's basically the matchup against Genji. All right, and I think that's 10 questions for the week. Thank you for watching this week's episode, and I'll see you guys next time.